Hello and welcome everyone to the Indian Youth Economic Association's The Agenda. Today we welcome you all to the largest ever panel that we have assembled for our webinar. And before we begin introducing the topic and the speakers, panelists for our discussion today, our best wishes for India's Independence Day. We have maintained a tradition, a long-standing tradition at the Indian Youth Economic Association for a series of podcasts centric to the issues in India, focusing on commerce, economy, industry, law, history, and governance. And we will be doing the same this year. From today, that is the 15th of August, till the 22nd of August, this whole week we'll be bringing to you specific podcasts on history, law, economics, technology, as well as education. And today we begin with our podcast on how the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting lockdowns have affected Indian businesses, Indian industries. Most certainly, to any independent nation, to any sovereign, any free democratic nation, its freedoms, its political and social freedoms are of utmost importance. But it must not be forgotten that economic freedoms are as important to preserving these political and social freedoms. While our core discussion is not going to be on economic freedoms, but today we will be appreciating and recognizing the role that businesses, and especially small businesses, play in providing employment and generating wealth and creating a robust economy, or at least spurring the economy. And for that, I will now be welcoming our panelists for today. First of all, we have with us Mr. Ajay Sabharwal. He's a leather technologist. He's trained at Northampton and the City and Guilds at London, UK. He is the former president of the Indian Leather Products Association, and he's founder and CEO of a global leather brand, primarily an export-driven unit across the world, primarily centered in Europe. And he has operations out of the beautiful city of the beautiful state of West Bengal. And Hunt is a genuine leather brand. So, Mr. Sani, a very warm welcome to you. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Next up, we have Mr. Raj Bajaj, whose education background is that he is trained as an engineer from Delhi. He is currently part of the executive committee of the IATO, and he heads Perfect Travels, Adventure World, and Bajaj Indian Homestay. He's been in the tourism, travel, and hospitality industry for decades and brings that experience to us today. And he will be sharing the various overviews and the key pointers of what is the current state of the industry. A very warm welcome to you. Next up, we have Mr. Amrit Maan, who is the Honorary Secretary of the ITTA. And he heads Maan Tourist Transports and has an experience of 36 years in the transport industry. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Maan. Next, we have Mr. Neeraj Dev, who has over 25 years of experience in the fitness and wellness and health industry. He currently operates two gyms, one in Defense Colony and the other in Gurgaon. His education was at the St. Stephen's College. Apart from the industry that he represents in terms of gyms and sort of the health and fitness industry, he is trained extensively in the UK, in the United States, and in Singapore in health, fitness, and nutrition. And to top that, he is a national champion when it comes to weightlifting. He has set up various gyms across the country, and I think I find it appropriate not just to add, because I believe that is the secondary part, that he's trained many TV personalities and film stars. But the more important part, though not really related to the theme of business here today, but some of our followers might sort of enjoy this part, that is record. He's a national champion or a national record holder, and his record on this all three lifts combined is a whopping 707.5 kilos. Right? With that, I have next up with me Mr. Aksh Sani, who is presently at the Indian School of Business, Hyderabad, and who has previously completed his BSc in Economics from St. Xavier's College, and is a business development professional. He is presently with Hunt Leather. Welcome. Welcome, Mr. Dave. Next up, and last but certainly not the least, an old friend, if I may, before introducing his business credentials, so to say, he is a protege of the great late Mr. Jaspal Bhatti, and is a well-known name in the Punjabi comedy and sort of film industry. And certainly we will not be looking at a PP water balls kind of setup here today. A very warm welcome to a dear friend and co-founder and creative head and producer at Bhasar, which focuses on online marketing. So Arpit, a very warm welcome to you as well. Now that I've gotten all of our panelists on board, I will be beginning with Aksh, because I want to begin with a key aspect that is sort of common to all. And the key questions that I wish to pose to you, Aksh, are these, right? From the point of view of business development, what are the key changes that you see pre-post-COVID? What is it that you see that businesses must do, or what are you seeing on the ground, or what is it that you're trying out yourself as a possible strategy in terms of dealing with such fat-tailed events in the future? That is, how should businesses attempt to sort of become robust to such shocks? And most importantly, to add to that, because this is about some practical experience as well, is that how is this impacting specifically small or micro enterprises, and what is, if I may add, the family-run business setup, and what is its reaction to it? How are such businesses coping with it? So, Aksh, hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Ajay. And before I begin, a very happy Independence Day to all our viewers present today. And also thank you, Ajay, for giving me the opportunity to speak today. So I'll just share my screen before I get started. Can you all see my screen? Just somebody confirm, that would be nice. Yes, okay, I think it's visible. Okay, so well, Ajay, to answer a lot of your questions, I'd probably be going through my understanding of the impact of COVID-19 on Indian businesses. But well, when I initially saw the experience that we have on the panel, I felt that perhaps my purview should only be restricted to a student's view, because well, with people who have been in the industry for 30 years, I probably don't feel as qualified to talk about I mean, what businesses are doing right now and what's the best way to go about. But at least from the education that I've been getting from B school, and I think this is a very good time to be in a B school, because with new things developing related to COVID, it's a great time to learn on how one should actually go about things. So I can share two views here. One is how I have seen a business, a family business that I come from, that has been running for the last 25, 30 odd years in a particular way, and how infusion of new ideas into such family businesses could actually bring about a change, because the processes that are already there in existing family businesses specifically, and a lot of MSMEs in general, they have been tested over a lot of years, but new ideas that the young generation brings in is something unique to the young generation. So a confluence of these two would ideally be the best way to tackle not only COVID, but any problem that comes up ahead in the future. And the second view I want to bring about is the view of a scholar. I mean, there is always an ideal way that businesses should be run. And of course, there is a practical aspect. Not all those ideal ways are very pragmatic way to go about it. So when we're talking about what is the best intersection that you can get between what is possible and what is the ideal way of going about it, is the best possible business scenario that we can get for ourselves, especially for business of our size. So when I'm thinking about what exactly, I mean, how exactly to see something like COVID, which is a setback for businesses, most businesses actually, we see it. So we see the market being a race that is run between the companies, because everybody's fighting for market share, and it's competitive. It's not, everybody's not content with their space. They always want more. So when a hurdle or a shock comes, then businesses need to sort of leapfrog them. And the businesses that are actually able to leapfrog them the fastest, the quickest leap time, actually puts them ahead of competition for the time being. Now, what happens when a large hurdle like COVID comes is that a lot of businesses actually fall down over there because they don't probably have that prowess or that quick adaptiveness to sort of get by it. So when businesses really need to think about how to be robust in the face of problems, especially like COVID, we need to sort of think about how we can actually build a business, build a strong foundation to these businesses. So while I'm saying that COVID is a big threat because a lot of people fall down, I also see it as an opportunity. That opportunity being that extra mile that you get to run, which other people are not able to run because they could not overcome the threat. So essentially, dealing with crises is a twofold task. One is minimizing the threat, and one is maximizing the opportunity. When I'm talking about reducing the threats, so there's by the book, there's a lot of ways to reduce the threat. But when it comes to businesses of small and medium scale and family businesses also, they function in a very different way from corporates. And actually, most of the B school education we get and most of the webinars that we attend online about how businesses should be run are very corporate based or very large scale business based. So all of those things are not practical. But I just want to touch upon two important points which I feel would be very relevant to small businesses, because essentially the difference that I see in small businesses is that it is no more than a manifestation of the owner, that one entity, the CEO, and his ideas and his thoughts, and how he builds a team to execute that. So the owner plays a very key and a very pivotal role in the growth and the ups and downs of the company. So when I'm talking about the owner, I mean, ideally, if you want to think what's the best way of going about it, companies like, let's say, Swiggy, Zomato, Uber, they leverage data, they leverage technology. Of course, at our scale, that is not possible. So why do they actually need data and technology? Is to connect with their audience. But for smaller businesses, of course, we don't have that diverse a network. We have a small but strong network. So our network entirely works on the relationships that we build. So building relationships is important because at least when I was handling the business development, while I still am handling the business development for my company, at the time COVID came in, we were facing imminent cancellation of orders, which would result in cancellation of orders to our suppliers ahead, and eventually, and this is probably the toughest part, reducing the labor force. I mean, canceling orders is just a big blow to a company's revenue, and canceling orders for the suppliers is same for them. And just sacking people is a very very bad thing, because you've been working with these people for God knows how many years. They put in their sweat to make the company where it is today, and then you have to let them go. It's a very tough thing. So what I mean by building relationships here is that when COVID struck and we sort of expected that there would be a downsize everywhere, our clients told us that we don't want the products right now, but I'm not canceling the order. I will want it sooner or later. So just hold on to it for now. And likewise, we passed that information down to our suppliers where we said that, look, right now the situation is not good. We will not be able to pick up the goods from you right now, but hold on to it. We'll do something or the other in future. And the surprising thing was that everywhere down the chain there was no hostility. People understood each other. People understood the situation. They adopted. Now, if I'm thinking, if I was Amazon, if the middleman me over here was Amazon, my customers are canceling order, I can't really say much to them. And when I'm telling my suppliers that, hey, I placed an order with you with a 2 month lead time, and today I cannot buy that from you anymore, the person is not going to empathize with me. He does not care if Amazon goes out of business. He's going to say, boss, just give me my money. But in a small business like ours, because we have spent time in building that relationship with them, we have that advantage, and they respect, they empathize with the problem. Same thing goes for labor force. If Amazon were to lay off some laborers today, or not laborers, let's say staff or employees today, it would be a different story than when we do it. Because when we told, when if we are to tell our labor force that I don't have any more work for you right now, and I'm going to have to lay you off, somewhere or the other, he understands the pain, because we have also helped them through, and we have been with them through times of crisis. So it is that empathy that we show for them and that they show for us, because of which this becomes easier. And all of this comes from being true to your core values. You as a business owner, as an entity, have some core values which you exude when you speak to people and when you're doing business with them. And it's very easy to be to show that kind of respect to each other when business is going good. But how do you behave when business is down and you're making a loss and things are tough? How you behave then is what truly defines your core values. And if you can stand by your core values, then there is that extra amount of respect, and that respect that you generate for yourself, which sort of gives you an advantage after all of this crisis is over. The second thing I want to talk about is that there is always a need for us to keep upgrading ourselves. When I talk about upgrading, I was thinking that if I am in a business today, let's say the business that we are specifically in, which is manufacturing and export of leather products. So over years and years of doing the same thing, we have developed some level of expertise in it. So if 1 year ago somebody told me that, hey Aksh, what happens if people stop buying bags? What do you do? I would laugh at his face, saying that why would people stop buying bags? That's an extremely far-fetched thing to say. But look at it today. People are actually not buying bags for the time being. They have different priorities. Their priorities have changed. So if in the last 30 years, the only expertise that I have developed is to build bags nicely, today it means nothing because the world needs something else. The world has changed. And the hard fact that businesses are actually facing is that the world is changing not only for COVID, but the world is changing fast in general. So when we are trying to build expertise in one particular field, it's great. But what happens when that becomes obsolete, which is very likely to happen now? So when we talk about upgrading, we are talking about building our competence in not one, but multiple things and learning more and more about everything that is out there. Because with the access of uh, technology and internet, you have a lot of information at your fingertips. It's important to keep learning on the system, in the process. And by learning, you can actually strengthen your vulnerable processes. And these processes are those that have been passed down from the last 10-15 years, which worked great back then, but perhaps may not be optimum now. So it's important to understand what is the way to make it more optimum now. And that's why upgrading is very important. In terms of taking an opportunity, one of the most important things is innovation. And innovation need not only be tech driven, although today's a majority of today's innovations are tech driven, but the essence, the idea of innovation is to sort of expand your possibilities of staying alive. What I mean by that is during COVID, consider it, when for us, for a business like us, where we make bags and people are not buying bags right now, these two ovals that you see over here in what we can do and what the world needs would have probably been completely disjoint. We have no possible intersection where people would actually want to do business with us. So innovation would actually help us move these two together and bring about an intersection point where we can actually survive and thrive. And if I were to give an example, let's say the stitching machines that we use to make bags now becomes the stitching machines that we use to make masks. So maybe 1 year ago, I would have not even in the wildest of dreams imagined that my factory would be making face mask for the public. But entirely, that is exactly what's been driving my revenue today. So it is an innovation actually comes from thinking out of the box. It's not, it may not be the things that we have been learning in the last 30 years, because as I said, the world keeps changing. So it's important to know what's coming up. It actually flows through from upgrading yourself. So as you're upgrading, you will try and figure out more ways by which we can actually bring about this intersection and survive in today's world. And a follow through of that is collaborations, which I'm seeing is becoming a very big trend in today's world. So when we're talking about what we can do is basically the capabilities that we have built up in the last odd years of doing business. But imagine if we could collaborate with other people, the possibilities of what we can do would become much larger. And when the possibilities of what we can do becomes larger and the collaboration actually helps us service the needs of the world, that intersection space in the middle becomes much larger. And collaborations are seen in the world today. It was quite pleasantly surprising to see that Wow Momo and CCD, both of them have collaborated to sell, to sort of club their customer base together to boost each other's sale. On a normal day, you would not imagine these two working together, but today, as the situation demands, they are working together. And collaboration is probably the way forward, because when things start to develop quickly, more quicker, you don't have enough time to build competence yourself. You need to sort of think about how you can leverage the advantages of others, while giving them your expertise in exchange. And collaboration would be probably the smartest way to go about in the coming times. And with that, I just thank you so much for being a patient audience. And Ajay?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Aksh. That was really insightful. And I think very important points there being raised by Aksh, that on some level, the essence of business, or the core point of business in these times, is always survival. Right? If you can ensure your survival through these situations, either by cooperation with firms which would otherwise be categorized as economic rivals or competitors, then that's the way forward. And that is the need of the hour. In a sense, we go back to John Nash, sort of collaborating and coming together and cooperating is the only way forward. And with that, thanks so much, Aksh. We'll see if we can get some questions towards you towards the end. Next up, we have Mr. Maan. Mr. Maan, I would like to discuss with you the issues that currently are being faced by the transport industry. Now, needless to say, this is an industry that is sort of most impacted, and the whole nature in terms of the demand of the industry is reduced significantly, if not completely evaporated. So, what are the key issues that you're facing? What are the key problems that you're facing? And what is the state of the industry at this point? And what are your plans in terms of how do you think recovery might be, or will be, or when it will be? And what are the what is the likelihood of sort of survival of some of the key players in the industry? So, Mr. Maan, a warm welcome to you, and we'd like your thoughts on that.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I will divide all this into 4-5 sections. One is impact on our industry. The second is sport. Sport is from all angles, from the state, from the government, from the other departments, and the survival of our industry, and the later the revival of our industry. So impact is, till now our business is almost 10% to the value the last year we were having, and I don't think so. For at least for next 6 months, we are going to go up. It is going to remain like maybe even if we achieve 20%, we'll be fine with that. If you talk about my own company's target, our own company target is around 30%. If we'll achieve 30%, we'll say, okay, it is well done. In terms of our industry, there has been already more than 50% job losses are there, which is a huge thing. And if things continues like this, I see another 20% more. Maybe like in totality, there is 70% job losses. It is really strange. We don't get any support from the government despite giving 9% foreign revenue or GDP to the government. Our tourism industry gives GDP revenue almost 9% to the government and gives 10% jobs, employment in totality in India through tourism to the GDP. And we are the one who are most affected at the first sight of anything happens. It is, if you talk about in 1989 Mandal Commission, if you talk about in 1996 Babri, if you talk about 9/11 in USA, if you talk about 26/11 in India, our industry is hit really hard. And this COVID is, no one has seen like that. And the most affected in our industries are the people, those are more into luxury. Like those are running Volvo coaches, those are running BMW cars or vans, something like that. And now I come to the survival. The survival is really important. Survival is more important than revival. I see lots of people talking about steps to take to increase tourism, bring tourism, more tourism. But I say we have to take steps for survival. In one of the speeches, our Prime Minister said that "Jaan hai, jahan hai." So we need some kind of oxygen. We have to think of the ways how to keep ourselves alive, and that is important. If we are alive, only they can survive in, we can revive in the future. There has been selling spree of vehicles from our industry, as the business has been down by almost 90%. So people, they don't, all our operators, they don't have options but to sell the vehicles. Now a lot of hindrances we are facing in selling the vehicles also. Let's say we go to the bank, they're trying to blackmail us, they're trying to squeeze us, they're charging like 2 to 7% foreclosure charges only when we want to close our loans, and that is very important to squeeze our business so that our expenses are low. Right now, it is very important that our expenses are low. Our business is not going to increase. If we talk about tourism business, there are different categories like international, domestic, pilgrimage, conferences, events, adventure, and I don't see any hope, at least for next 6 months or till that vaccine comes. There are no hotels working, there are no international flights are there, so international tourism is, I don't see before October to 2021 is going to have any kind of international tourism. Yes, I have a ray of hope from the domestic tourism. So domestic tourism, whatever we feel that it's going to pick from let's say March, April, and for the corporate tourism, for the corporate sector, already there's instruction from, let's say, Google, Facebook, all the big IT companies and other companies also to work from home at least till 31st December of this year. So even I don't see any corporate movement is there. When we are trying to sell our vehicles, there are no buyers. We are getting almost 20 to 30% less value of our vehicles when trying to sell them. And strangely, there's no support from any state government or any our central government also, from any bank, even from the banks, other than loans. Or I feel that our industry is like a milking cow to the government, which does not need any kind of feed. So they are happy that way only. They are not there to help us out. No one is there to listen to us. So now I talk about something about revival. How we can survive or revive is combined thing. So what we expecting from the government, we expecting from the very beginning, like from the banks start with, we want our foreclosure charges to be waived off. We want from the bank that they give us interest-free loans. Maybe the government can come out with some kind of schemes which support our industry, which gives our industry some kind of oxygen, so that till the time this COVID is over, we can have some kind of oxygen. We can survive this whole period. We want waiver of taxes, state taxes from the state governments, because as our vehicles, they are not running at all. For last 5 months, our vehicles stand still. There's no running at all. So we would like to have some kind of oxygen on this front also from the state governments. There should be no state taxes. There should be no insurance charges as the vehicle they are running. And it is very easy. The state governments can easily waive of taxes. Although few state governments have waive of taxes also for a couple of months, but we are expecting them to waive for at least for an year. Insurance should be extended by at least 1 year. We should be offered like interest-free loans. There should be relaxation in PF, Provident Fund, as there's no business at all. But still, we are trying harder to give salaries to our staff out of our somehow out of our selling our assets. Somehow we are managing it, because we also understand that those people that are with us last maybe 20, 30 years, and we need to support them at this time. They need our support, and we are supporting them. We also want from the government like one India, one tax. If you can move in whole Europe, in 29 countries without any permit, without any taxes, why can't we move in India in all the states without paying any taxes? We also want, once this pandemic slows down, we also want from the government some kind of relaxation on GST on on the services, also on buying new vehicles also. But because next 18 to 2 years, what I see, our capacity of serving the tourists will be almost down by 50 to 60%. It means that 50 to 60% vehicles owned by our industry, they will be sold off. So when the tourism starts, we definitely want some kind of mechanism from the government to support us, from the bank to support us, so that we can start it again. We also suggest the government to coordinate with the foreign tourism boards for promotion of our tourism in India. We also want that recently, like a lot of governments, they are issuing advisories visiting India. So we also want that Indian government, they pursue with other governments, other countries, so that our country is promoted in terms of tourism. And more strongly, I would like to advise that there must be a committee of professionals to look into liberalizing our industry. I don't see any policy making in last 40 years. I'm in the business. I started like in 1985, 86, and there is no policy has come which is specifically designed for tourist transport services or specially designed for tourism. This is really strange. If you go out, if you go abroad, let's say you go to Thailand, if you go to Europe, you go to America, in wherever you go, they definitely promote group tourism, and the bus is parked the first, and then the taxis or cars, they are parked at a little distance. But whereas in India, this is very very strange. All the vehicles, even at the international airport, bus parking is like 3.5 kilometers from the airport, and the car parking is near. At even monuments also, and at stations, at all other locations, there's no specific heed is given for the parking, for the infrastructure. We also facing lot of other issues like speed limit on the highways. Oh, speed limit on the highways for the passenger vehicle is around 65 kilometers per hour for the buses. Whereas if you go if you want to promote the tourism, if the passenger is going at a 65 kilometer per hour speed, and other vehicles, they are going at 120 kilometers per hour, and even taxis also allowed 80 kilometers per hour. This is really strange. The passengers are going to waste their 20-25% time on just traveling only, whereas the people, those are using private cars, they are saving 20-25% more. So we just want that this thing to be liberalized. We are looking at some kind of COVID reforms from the government. Right now, if you talk about domestic tourism, you can't travel at all in any of the states. So all states, they're coming with their own fundas. You can say, let's say, if you're going to Uttaranchal, you need to have Uttaranchal or Himachal or some other places, you need to have a COVID test. So if a coach which has a capacity of 40 persons, and it is going to Himachal or Uttaranchal and go for COVID test, so each COVID test costs around 2,000 rupees per person. That comes to around 80,000 rupees just cost for the COVID test only. And moreover, then you need to have e-passes. A lot of hindrances are there. I just want the government to liberalize all these things so that that tourism can start at one go. I really admire, let's say, the Delhi government. So they have lifted all these hindrances on almost all the movement is free. You don't need e-passes, you need COVID test to go anywhere. But similar things I want from the other governments also. I think with this, I have said all the things what I'm supposed to say from my industry point of view. And I hope somebody senior listen to these things and help us in our bad times, help the industry, help the tourist operators. Those are having really bad time. I can say that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Mann. I think some very valid points being brought to the table here by Mr. Mann. Firstly, most importantly, the transport industry by itself is quintessentially the kind of service that is most impacted by COVID and the induced lockdowns. And on some level, that impacts the survivability of the firms that operate within that market. And I think that's an important point that is addressed by Mr. Mann here, that on some level, this is also after the lockdown, post-COVID, this is going to be the kind of industry that is going to be required, because at some level there will be social distancing that would still have to be maintained. And for that, to avoid public transport, mass public transport, utilization of transport assets from the private transport businesses is going to be absolutely essential. So some very valid points being made by Mr. Mann, and just on the point that he did end, that is about the fact that this is the industry that gets, or the tourism industry at large, and we will be getting Mr. Bajaj on that at a later stage of this discussion. But on some level, the tourism industry is known to get in a lot of forex, foreign exchange currency. Now, another industry that effectively, I think the demand from the tourism side is that, okay, fine, they should be treated at par with exporters. But at the same time, if there is one industry or one type of business that is most impacted and that has been otherwise instrumental to the growth of the nation and sort of bringing in forex, that has been export houses and manufacturers that export out of India. And on that particular note, I would like to welcome Mr. Adhar Sahani, with whom I would like to have a discussion about not just how exports in terms of manufactured goods have been impacted, but also how production has been impacted. And within that, this has been briefly brought up earlier as well, but within that, the important points regarding labor relations. Right. So what is the impact of that? What is the current state of manufacturing units that were otherwise exporting, and most certainly any other views that Mr. Sani would have regarding the present policies and how he or those in his industry are dealing with the lockdown. Mr. Sani.
Thank you, Ajay, and welcome everybody, and happy Independence Day. Every kind of possible nightmare that you could have in a business hit us when the COVID was declared all over the world, and right from cancellation of orders, non-payment, development for the future, because ours is a season-based industry. This is the time in February, March, when we have most of the exhibitions. We did a lot of fairs. We spend a lot of money in the fairs. And that is the time when it gives us the business for the entire year. And everything came to absolute zero in March once this COVID hit us. So as I said, every possible nightmare that you could imagine has hit us. And then we had everybody come up and say about relief measures and so on and so forth. What we did in our industry, we thought that charity begins at home. And that's when we thought we should take care of our workers first and foremost. This is a very major aspect of our industry, because our industry is one of the largest employers of human resources in India. And for this reason, it was very important that we should take a special view of how to handle the workers. So in a lot of webinars that we attended in various segments and various sectors, there was a lot of talk about 50%, 70%, 30%, and so on. Most of the people in our industry, what we did was we paid our workers 100% in March, in April, in May, and even till date. Although we employ a large number of people, but it is our responsibility to take care of the workers first and foremost. I can understand that a lot of industry talk about the expenses and the overheads, but in the end, the worker, especially in our industry, the workforce is about 10% of the cost. And if the general feel was that if we could not survive with 10% of the expense over so many years of business, then what have you been doing all these years? So somewhere a little bit of introspection is required. Why every time we have to say, get rid of the worker, get rid of this and that? There are so many other things that we can look into and save money. And what I feel that the human resource should be impacted in the end. So this is what we could do as a personal level. Now coming to the government took out a scheme for paying the 30% of the PF and ESI. But then again, the government kind of, you know, it had a segmentation over there. So it said that if you have workers less than 15,000 per month, and if 90% of your workers are less than 50,000 per month, you are eligible to get this money. How many companies today? I mean, our industry normally an average factory employs 400 to 500 people. I mean, how could you expect that 90% of 400 to 500 people would have salaries less than 15,000? That's not practical. So what you're basically saying is that although you bring up a scheme, but we should have seen what is the benefit of the scheme? How many people are going to benefit out of this scheme? If you compare this to the international standards, what we heard from our customers, that their salaries of their staff was paid up to 90% of the staff was paid, irrespective of the company, irrespective of the strength of the company, irrespective of the size of the company. So what I mean that the human resource is very important. This we should not neglect under any circumstances. So now coming to the business point of view, you will be surprised to know, I mean, a lot of people tell us and they think that leather is a big industry in India. It is indeed a big industry. But let me share something with you that we cater only 3% of the world demand for leather. Yes, I'm right. It's only 3%. 1, 2, 3, not more. So if there are billions and billions of bags being used in the world, only 3% come out of India. So what I'm saying is, again, looking at the opportunity part of it. So although worst nightmares have come true, but don't forget there is 90%, 97% of the business still available in the market that is up for grabs. Out of this 97%, this is mostly the business from Italy and China. So we in our fraternity we thought, okay, we are 3%, but the 97% is also impacted. So maybe we have a chance to take part of that business and kind of make up for a 3%. So everything is not lost end of the day. But here again, we need the intervention of the government. Now, how this 97% comprises? This 97 comprises of huge production facilities. In India, the leather goods industry is mainly on an MSME basis. And even in MSME, I would say on the micro level basis. And it is mostly entrepreneur driven. But internationally, if you go to China or Vietnam or even Thailand or even Bangladesh, now it has become something like a initiative that the government is taking. A case in point is Vietnam. Vietnam started getting into leather goods industry about 5 to 6 years ago. Before that, they were nowhere on the map. And today they are almost 22% of the world export in just 5 or 6 years. And what is the lesson here? The lesson is the government in Vietnam built huge manufacturing facilities and they hired it out to entrepreneurs who knew the job. So it was basically a plug and play. So here, even China, that's how China achieved the proportions it achieved. It was not a single man who was putting up factories that was employing 5,000, 10,000 people. It was the government that was setting up the infrastructure. And then they got the experts in and they said, hey, come on, this is the infrastructure. It can produce 10,000 bags a day. Come and take it over and run it. I mean, that's how it should be, because as an entrepreneur, I cannot put up a 10,000 capacity bag unit. That would cost me anywhere between 100 crores to put up a setup like that. And if the government could have made an infrastructure and just said, hey guy, you are in this industry for so long, you know this place inside out. You are not able to bring in the Walmarts and the big guys of the world because you cannot give them give them the quantity that they need. Here is the infrastructure, just plug and play and do it. And I think that's the way to go forward. And that's the proposal that we have given many times to the government. Every time we tell them, sir, please step into the infrastructure. Infrastructure is not our forte. Our forte is to produce the bag, produce a beautiful bag, make a beautiful leather, make a beautiful design. Our forte is not to invest 100 crores. We will always lose this business if you're not going to step in and make the infrastructure for us. So that is a big takeaway that we can take from this pandemic, and this is how we should look into the future. And apart from these two, oh yes, diversification. Now, what is the diversification? I mean, you can say that it is something like I'm trying to propagate my Sotan. What is that? That is the PU industry. The PU industry, the PU bags that are manufactured all over the world are a big part of the international consumption. And PU bags have always been a speciality of production in the eastern parts of India, well, beyond India. That is, if you go towards Thailand and go towards China, they are the main production houses of the PU bags. So there is also an opportunity over here. A lot of Indian big brands who are in the PU bags, lot of them are there who are selling the PU bags. They are always buying from China. They are buying billions and billions of worth of bags from China. Now, those industries need to look into the Indian manufacturers and start to source locally. So what I'm saying is, although you have one area where you can have an infrastructure for plug and play to make us competitive for the world, because the world wants huge quantities, which we cannot do. How many factories have 5,000 people, 6,000 people working for them? Whereas if you go to Vietnam and so on, every other factory is employing 5,000 people. And the second part, that is innovation, that is go into PU and similar kind, alternate material, which you can also take the business, considering the impact that that business is having in the world all over. So I think these are the ways to go forward. And overall, the business is not good at all. The orders have been cancelled. The season has been delayed. We are kind of erased the last, I would say, coming 6 months. It is as good as getting erased from our history because nothing is moving in this 6 months. Over to you, Ajay.
There's some extremely valid points being made by Mr. Sani here. And I think he brings that experience to the table for our audience here today. And that experience comes not just with a humanitarian aspect, I think most importantly, there's a practical angle to it. Right? What good are you to your business if you can't even take care of your workers, especially in an industry where there's sort of merely a small fraction of the entire cost? I think it's a very important perspective that is brought to the table, and most certainly, I think this is a point that we've brought up in the earlier discussions that we've had and in the papers that we have published, that on some level, even if we talk about it from a non-COVID point of view, and we're not even, and if we were not to ask even the government to sort of enter into business, creating that infrastructure, especially for export units, right? Because there is a huge hue and cry about, okay, getting in more forex, or India needs to become an export-driven country, and we need to sort of export more finished goods, and that's how we will end up increasing our economy, because that's the model that has been followed by sort of many countries in Asia, especially sort of East Asia. In that regard, I think an important role for the government has to be facilitating that process of sort of creating an infrastructure, and to sort of assisting businesses in being able to export. Because even if we weren't in a position to ask the government, okay, get in business with us, which is again on its own level a different argument, I think an important point is that the government must create platforms and infrastructure to be able to get businesses to do that themselves, right? To reduce regulation in that regard. And I think those are some very valuable points that Mr. Sani has brought to the discussion today. Thank you so much, Mr. Sani. And now I will be welcoming Mr. Raj Bajaj, who will be discussing the broad overview of the tourism industry, the travel industry, and the hospitality industry. Right? Much like transport, these are industries which are most significantly impacted, right? These are quintessentially the type of services that will be impacted by the COVID-19 induced lockdowns. But at the same time, there's an angle of sort of export that comes in here, or if not literal export of goods, at least the incoming of sort of forex, which is something again that the country is being deprived of, right? Certainly, it's unlikely that sort of levels of international tourism will, or sort of international tourism coming into India or otherwise, are going to increase anytime soon. So, with that in regard of that, we will be getting Mr. Bajaj on board to discuss, number one, the survivability issues in the industry. What are sort of the roadmaps to recovery, and what is it that they look forward to, perhaps in the sense of some support? Because I'm going to draw from Mr. Maan here, who said that we need to have a robust policy, a policy entirely driven for the tourism, transport, and travel industry. It needs to look at a sort of very specific, detailed, white paper sort of approach here. So let's see what Mr. Bajaj has to add to that, and along with that, we'd like to see an overview, a broad overview of how the industry is and what is the current state.
Thank you, Ajay and IYEA, for inviting me over. Namaste and best wishes for the Independence Day to all the viewers who are hooked up on this platform. To answer your question briefly, COVID-19 pandemic has a devastating effect. You see, has virtually brought the tourism industry to a virtual standstill. So much so that the industry, which has been hit the first, you see, way back in January 2020, you see, from there on, you see, it is right now, you see, nosedived, and this is gasping for oxygen. And right now, you see, we are on the ventilator support. So that is the devastating effect you see, this impact you see of this pandemic you see has on this industry. Primarily, you see, before I authenticate the statement with my opening remarks, you see, I would like to, you see, for the viewers, you see, I'd like to explain the demographics, you see, of the entire fraternity, how it moves. Primarily, you see, the dynamics of the tourism business actually is hinged fundamentally, broadly, and majorly on four prisms, and the verticals, you see, primarily, you see, as Ajay rightly said, you see, like travel, you see, is the first, you see, vertical in this prism. Travel, you see, when you say, is primarily, you see, when you go from point A to point B, you see, be it the airline or be it the surface transport, what Mr. Maan mentioned about, the railways, you see, is another mode, and then you see would be the riverline cruises. The other, you see, vertical, you see, which is very important, you see, is the aviation. You see, when you have under the aviation, you see, you have got the people used to move on the air passenger load, or people you see on the cargo, or the freight or the forwarding, or you see, you call people who are on the helicopter services or the air chartering business. So that is, you see, primarily falling under the purview of the aviation. The third, you see, vertical, you see, in this gamut of the business, you see, is hospitality, which is fundamentally, you see, a lot of investors and the stakeholders are the prime investors, you see, in this country. Hospitality, you see, would primarily comprise of hotels. You talk of the people involved in the food and beverages business, including the restaurants. You talk of people involved into the guest houses, the homestays. You talk of, you see, people who are involved in the wellness resorts, or people, you see, right up to the stage where up in the hills, people would be putting up the tented camps. So that is all falling under the purview of the hospitality. So all these three verticals, you see, when you encompass them and you see, you package them over, that, you see, formulates into a tourism activity. And that, you see, tourism activities primarily, you see, subdivided into three branches of tourism. First and foremost is inbound tourism for people who come into the country right from overseas. You see, be it for any reason or any specific purpose, be it for leisure or be it for conferences or incentives, or people, you see, the NRIs coming for their meeting up their families here, or you see going in for any religious or pilgrimage tour, or people you see coming in for medical tourism, or for any kind of activity which is called inbound tourism. And the fourth, you see, vertical, you see, in this whole exercise, you see, of this tourism business, you see, is the domestic business. So people who commute within the nation. So this is primarily, you see, for the people living in this nation. So that's called domestic tourism. And the third parameter in this exercise is the outbound tourism. You see, when you go overseas from India to the overseas land, you see, for any specific purpose, you see, like the inbound. Similarly, on the outbound, you see, that is called the outbound tourism. So all these specialists, you see, who are involved into this packaging of these tourism-related products, which is a service delivery and which is a people's business. So I think, which is one of the largest employer in the service sector, you see, this particular industry has, you see, substantial amount of employment, you see, which is actually infused into the entire segment. I just like to, you see, give you some statistical data, you see, for the viewers to really understand, you see, how India is positioned as vis-a-vis the entire globe. Overall, you see, if you talk of in a global world, the global travelers, you see, move, you see, almost about 1,200 million global travelers in the world, which accrue the earnings to the tune of $600 billion. That's the kind of earnings which is churned out of the tourism and hospitality and interrelated industries. So far as the India's position, you see, we were growing at really a pattern trend of nearly 10 to 12%, you see, right until December 2019, when you see the first messages of were trickling in from Wuhan. You see, it all started in January, you see, when the first kind of messages, you see, was done by the Indian government on the 31st of January, you see, when they stopped the visas for people coming into from China. Now, in the data points, you see, when you talk about India's contribution, you see, to these sector for tourism, inbound sector, you see, gets roughly close to about 10.89 million. That's the calendar year 2019. So that's the kind of figure, you see, India had for the inbound sector. And that is, you see, churned up to about roughly US dollar terms, about 28.59 billion. That's the kind of, you see, churning effect, the multiplier effect on the various commodities and interrelated industries, you see, which I mentioned about in the four verticals. In terms of the domestic, you see, we get roughly close to 26.3 million travelers within the nation, you see, who accrue about 73.8 billion US dollar into the exchequer of the nation. And the total, you see, outbound, you see, flow out of India is about 18.5 million, which is the current statistical data of the calendar year 2019. Now, ever since, you see, this pandemic happened in January 2020, and from there on, you see, it moved on with the first, message, you see, which was revealed by the Indian government, you see, that whosoever was traveling, you see, within the nation, they have to be sent back to their nations. You see, this evacuation process happened and the entire industry got with a cognizant act, and they sent them just back to the respective countries, you see, way back sometime in the phase of middle of March on to the end of March. So that was the phase, you see, when people, you see, were special arrangements were made, or people, you see, were flown off. And that's where the exercise of the cancellations started with the airline, with the railways, respective wildlife parks. It started with all kinds of stakeholders who were involved into this packaging. Now, if you talk of India's positioning, you see, in terms of the ranking, we have done fairly well. I would say that right until 2019, ever since the Modi government, which came in 2014, I think India's pattern graph, you see, was probably growing at a fairly large, substantial way. But you see, having said that, you see, in comparative scale, you see, the revenue loss, you see, what COVID has actually resulted in the Q1 of 2020, you see, we've had about 70,000 crore loss, you see, what the industry has suffered so far. And the estimated loss, you see, what CII and other, you see, associations, including IATA, you see, has given forward to the government, you see, which is close to about 10 lakh crore, That's the estimated loss you see on an annualized basis of the FY 2021 you see we shall be having. In terms of the job loss, you see, if I just narrate, this is to the tune of really about 4 to 5 crore. You see, people you see have job lost, which is ever since you see this first news you see started trickling in. So you can imagine you see the total you see people you see who are working in this segment, indirect and direct jobs, you see was to the tune of 8.75 crore people you see working for this industry and interrelated industries. And that is the kind of impact you see this pandemic you see has you see over this segment. Now, in terms of the ranking, you see, when I proportionate India's share with the other world, you see, India is sitting at right now, you see, at about 0.9% of the world share. You see, because out of that share, what I mentioned, you see, France would probably be ranked as number 1 in the world with about 89.4 million tourist arrivals, you see, which come into France, followed by very closely by Spain, which gets about 82.4 million. The United States is position number 3, which is about 79.6 million. And China is sitting at about 62.9. I'll just go way back, you see, when I started in the tourism business about 4 decades ago. When I used to first, you see, do the marketing for India as a destination, way back in the early 80s, India, you see, at that time was getting tourist arrivals to the tune of about 1.26 million. And Malaysia was getting roughly about 1.8 million. And China, you see, at that time was getting about 2.8. So that is the paradigm shift, you see, which has happened right from the era of 40 years ago, and how we have climbed up the graph, you see, and what India, you see, right now has got the estimated earnings, which is about 5% of that figure, what I mentioned about US dollar 600 billion. And India, you see, gets probably, you see, a fairly, you see, good climb, you see, India has really made. And I think if maybe we have more cognizant act, you see, of the industry, because we've been giving time to time suggestions on behalf of the fraternity. We have been giving to the various ministries. We've been giving to Niti Aayog, and before that it was a planning commission, and we have been giving it via the chambers of CII and FICCI and PhD and ASSOCHAM. You see, all those type of representations, you see, which we have forwarded to the government. Now, those type of you see, the groundwork is right now being done, because right now the government is more keen to focus on the lives of the people, because the two fundamental things what the government, you see, always does, you see, and that is every government in power, you see, would do. First is protecting the lives of the people. Internally, you see, they were protected with the inland security, you see, the home security, and the borders, you see, will be controlled by the armed forces. And the third parameter would be the health and the food supply. So that is, you see, primarily, you see, covering up the livelihood, you see, aspect, what we'll be touching today, you see, what Ajay has the topic on, which is probably on the economy part. And that is essentially, you see, the business, you see, which we are completely as business community, you see, are really affected. So what I possibly, you see, would say, that not only the tourism industry, the other industries who have been implicated, you see, because this is a ripple effect and a multiplier effect. You see, like there's so many interrelated industries there. Like today, you talk of where I mentioned about the restaurant business or the food and supply, and with the aviation, the agriculture, you've got the hotels, you've got transport, railway, the handicraft and textile. There's another industry which is very closely knit with the tourism, because any, you see, person who is coming, you know, to India internationally or domestically moves in from point A to point B. You see, he is adding that value to the exchequer, and he is, you know, adding that value to the least denominator factor in India. You know, like people right in the right trodden, you see, of the northeast or right up down in the south, you see, and to the Trichy belt, you see, speaking the handicraft product, you see, is also the beneficiary into this whole exercise of tourism, right to the stage of, you know, people, you see, rickshawala, you talk of people, the tourist guides, you talk of the elephant mahats, you talk of the camel man, or maybe even basic elementary people who are selling the water on the road. You see, the roadside amenities, you see, people, you see, they're getting the direct advantage accrued out of tourism. You see, people who are involved, you see, in every gamut of exercise in this country, if you talk of it, since it's essentially a public connectivity loop and it's a service delivery to the nation. So that's the kind of impact. So I think this country can really boom it up you see, if tourism, you see, could be given the same type of weightage, you see, what was given, about 2 to 3 decades ago with the information and technology industry. And I think we have got a very dynamic Prime Minister in Mr. Modi, you see, who have been advocating, in every forum, you see, he talks of the 5 Ps, and tourism is always mentioned, even including the previous speech, what he gave from the ramparts. He mentioned, the Dekho Apna Desh, which he advocated the fact that, you see, more of the travelers, domestic travelers, you see, have to move around from point A to point B within the nation. And that could probably be the money spinner to have the multiplier effect on the tourism industry. So I foresee that, you see, globally, India has got a very strong position. And I think the industry has given its proposals. The government is really working on those. And I'm sure, you see, the lot of positives is going to come back because, we are expecting a fiscal and stimulus package, to be announced sometime like in October. I think Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, you see, has been talking very highly, you see, the chief economic advisor, you see, on these parameters. And I'm sure, you see, once the infusement of this fiscal and stimulus package, you see, comes underway for our kind of businesses, I'm sure that, you see, upliftment, you see, of the things, you see, happening in cognizance with what the Honorable Prime Minister announced today, you see, from the ramparts of the Red Fort in terms of the infrastructure infusement of about 110 lakh crore, you see, what he envisages to pump in. And I think if you compound all these things, India is really on a foot trail of a vertical upsurgence. And I don't see any reason, you see, why this country cannot really, you see, skyrocket and we cannot be the world leaders. So I'm sure that, you see, a lot of positives, you see, will be taken out. India is at a foundation stage, you see, of laying up these principles. And I think after this pandemic, you see, maybe a vaccine, you see, is maybe coming sometime in the January to March 2021 period. You see, I foresee that by September 21 onwards, you see, you'll be on a takeoff position, and hopefully, God willing, you see, we'll have a huge sentiment, you see, which will be positive, reposing the confidence amongst the diaspora of the public, be national or international, because currently, you see, people are in a fear psychosis zone. And I'm sure that, you see, there's a pandemic effect, you see, will nullify. And so we should be very positive, you see, in our thoughts. Positively we think, and we should move forward in our approach. And there's no way India cannot be the leader in the world. Thank you, and back to Ajay.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bajaj. I think those were extremely important points. On some level, it's good to see the enthusiasm and the optimism of Mr. Bajaj for the industry in the years forward. And I think that is the key takeaway. Right? The idea is to survive the worst parts or the worst periods, and that which is to follow would most certainly be a rewarding period. As the old adage goes, this too shall pass. And with that, I would like to get on board Mr. Neeraj David, who's Managing Director of Craft Fitness. And Neeraj sir, my key questions to you are again about not just survivability of businesses, but then again about the key issues as to how is it that the fitness and the health industry will innovate as well to meet the demands of the market. And by the market here, I don't just mean the economic market, I also mean the sort of requirements of health, right? The externalities. Because on some level, the scope or the place that a gym is, especially those which are sort of closed down, where sort of people are there in a closed area, there's not a lot of ventilation in a lot of places, and so there's constant sort of human touch, or there's contact, and people are certainly within a certain frame where sort of social distancing is not it's not optimally possible. So 2 areas. One, certainly, as the Delhi Gym Association says, that if by the end of this month gyms aren't operational and they're not sort of opening, there's a likelihood that over 3/4 of all gyms would permanently have to shut down. So your thoughts on that? First, regarding the survivability of businesses, how will they cope? What is the sort of approach forward. And within that, the other point that a health angle, a safety angle, a risk angle is absolutely important. And how is it that the fitness industry, especially gyms, which have otherwise been most sort of hard hit by this pandemic, are planning to cope? Is it that there will be some sort of online scaling? Will there be sort of changes in the pricing structures? What would be the approach that the fitness industry would be taking, and what are your views on that? Mr. David.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ajay, for the opportunity. Happy Independence to everyone who's listening here. First, to talk about, in a nutshell, about the fitness industry pre-COVID. Well, we were a very booming industry with a lot of awareness increasing in all segments of the society. And there was a very healthy coexistence between the big and small players, and like big gym chains and small gyms were able to survive healthily and coexist in the market. And having said so, they were one of the biggest source of employment providers, which is career oriented to the youth of the society here. Unfortunately, nobody realized that the pandemic would change that all. And the little preparation that I did for this podcast was that went through the Hindustan Times survey, which states that 70% of Delhi's gym may shut down for good if they don't resume their businesses within a month. This survey was conducted for 5 days with sample size of about over 1,000 gyms. And as many as 80% gym owners will have to wrap up the business because of huge losses they've incurred during the lockdown. This has resulted in large scale of unemployment for people who are attached with the fitness centers and the gyms. And it is said that the COVID-19 crisis has impacted the fitness industry adversely, irrespective of the class and brand of gyms. And the road ahead is tough even for big fitness chains. So now, what is the way out? Firstly, to start with, virtual training workouts is the new innovation to promote health and fitness within the society, which you can also term as online fitness training programs. The data shows that since March 2020, there's been about 56% increase within the society, within people who have started using online classes. It's not that online classes were not available before. They were also available post-pandemic, but there is a significant increase in these classes. And it's easier for consumers to be able to just show up within the comfort zone of their house, and there is no time to travel or commute, and somehow they're able to take out time within their existing schedule and do some kind of a daily workout routine. Having said so, the most popular programs that are available online are yoga, dance classes, HIIT program, which is high intensity interval training, some body assisted workout training for strength and conditioning. But the biggest impact in this pandemic has been a huge segment which is on a very on an advanced level of strength training program. People who need a structured weight training program. You need weights, you need machines, you need a range of dumbbells, Olympic bar maybe, and plates. So that is the segment which has really taken a hard toll, because they don't have much of opportunity to train. And I would include athletes and sportsmen and sportswomen into this, because that is a problem. Until unless there are few who are lucky enough to have some kind of a home setup arrangement. So this is a huge segment that has taken the toll. So the way forward for fitness industry now seems to be very clear that it's digital. And having said so, the digital would further expand the boundaries, not just for fitness, but for wellness and also for mental health. So if people are smart enough and innovative enough to take into consideration the aspect of wellness and mental health, which they can cater to not just to the youth, but maybe to the kids, right from maybe 5 to 6 years to up to 14, 15, and to a matured audience like the corporate clients and even senior citizens. So there is a scope of increasing the bandwidth of getting more business, but you have to do it in a smart way. There will be also demand for more structured and customized training programs whenever we reopen the gyms, which would further give opportunity for personal trainings. So there will be hopefully more business for fitness experts who can understand an individual's requirement and customize the training accordingly and help them and support them. Then we need to focus on, whenever we reopen, what would be the new guidelines to come up, because there will be a lot of fear amongst the gym users or members to come back. So there has been some guidelines by the government and whatever surveys that have been done internationally, and to just to name a few, it will be maintaining kind of 6 feet distance within people. Smaller gyms would have a bit more problem doing that, but places which are a little bit bigger would have some kind of an advantage there. Then face shield and face mask would be a very compulsory thing. Face shield is better because if you're doing some cardio routine program, face mask would make you feel a bit claustrophobic, but face shield would be a bit more better there. Then it's basically about improving your standards of personal hygiene. So frequent hand wash or sanitization, use would be good enough. Then one key aspect which is very important would be the respiratory etiquettes, and they have to be very strictly followed to stay safe and be safe, not just for yourself but for the community as a whole. So there have to be strict practices when you're covering your mouth and your nose while you're coughing and sneezing. That's a very important area. One has to get more habitual doing so. Then self-monitoring of personal health would be also very important. You have to be more aware of how you're feeling. If you're feeling a little down and feverish or coughing and all, you'll have to avoid coming to the gym. Then spitting strictly would be a big no. So people who have this habit of spitting and all will have to be a bit more concerned and aware of it. Installation of the Arogya Setu app would be very helpful for sure. Then frequent and consistent disinfecting of gyms with specific COVID-related chemicals would be a must for operations and for the safety of the members. Then members' participation towards a responsible hygiene will be mandatory now. It should go a few levels more up. Then a practical solution would be now slot systems, which would become the new norm in gyms, especially in peak hours, where you normally see that in mornings it's 6 a.m. to about 8:30 a.m. is the peak hour, and then in the evenings it's about 6:37 p.m. till about 9 to 10 p.m. So there has to be some kind of a structured arrangement where people come in slot systems and they book their slots in advance, and they are in and out within 40-45 minutes. So that would be something which would be very crucial for future gym operations. Gyms having outdoor space, including rooftops, will have an advantage because then they could manipulate and maneuver people in a more better way. Circulation of fresh air is also very crucial. You can't just blow ACs the way people were doing before. So that would be something where people or members would have to get accustomed and used to of the climate conditions. A small thing like a separate shoe should be compulsory uh, for gym usage. You should carry your own pair of shoes when you enter the gym and use them, so that there's less infection, less chance of infection. And gym entrance will have to keep sanitizers and thermal screening uh, mandatory and compulsory uh, at the front office or the reception. So I think these are the small, common, practical points that people would have to take into consideration and become used to, so that they can restart their fitness programs and try to make gym operations as normal as possible within the new guidelines. So I hope that's about it uh, at the moment. Thank you. Over to you, Ajay.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. David. We're having some slight technical difficulties. Just give me a second. Yes. Yes. We had a slight glitch there. And I think some very important points being made by Mr. David, emphasizing not just on the aspect. And I've realized this is a trend today that I've seen, even though our intent was to bring all the people here as businessmen and talk about how their respective industries have been plagued sort of on an economic level. But I've seen that they've actually been emphasizing on the humanitarian, the safety, the health uh, aspects of what society is facing currently. So I think that is indicative of something that ultimately there is the strongest component to any business is a human component, and Indian businesses have not forgotten that at all. If at all we were to say that, okay, fine, this is a business entirely, because that's a trend that I've observed, and I think very rightly suggested by Mr. David that as and when uh, health outfits, gyms open up, there will have to be certain precautions that have to be taken, and in that regard, that is of utmost priority. Now, I have had requests over the years in our podcasts that I must have a podcast entirely in Hindi. While I might not be incorrect in suggesting that we are working towards something like that. If at some point we were to have a podcast only in Punjabi, which is something that is somewhere up there in my list of priority as well, Mr. Arpit Kumar would certainly be the person leading that podcast. And while I understand that for this podcast, we will not be indulging in our local tongue, I'm going to be restrained to utilizing English to welcome Arpit on board here. Arpit is a young entrepreneur, and I don't use that word quite easily, right? I wouldn't use that phrase for any of the panelists that we've had this evening, right? But I'm going to use this for one. Because right out of college, he is going to work for his own stuff, right? He said, I'm not going to go for a job. I'm not going to go for a master's or anything of that sort. I'm going to work for myself. And all of my discussions with him have always been about how he comes up with a new idea and how he's going to implement. An extremely high energy person, hustle, he founded Bhasar and is currently its creative director and producer. We focus on social media campaigns, digital marketing schemes, and we'll have Arpit talk a lot more about it. He's in a better place to answer that. But at the same time, I think this gives us a perspective that is different from manufacturing industries. Right? We've had some, so when we talk about tourism and we talk about sort of other industries, sure, there's a component of services, but this gives us another component of technology being utilized, right? Of a significant amount of scalability, and how that can be achieved, and how perhaps other businesses can also look at such a path, right? So traditional businesses, brick and mortar stores, how they can sort of move in that direction, because on some level, even though that was becoming the need of the hour as a result of sort of the competition prevailing in the world, or the economic competition prevailing in the world and in India, COVID has made that an absolute necessity. Right. So on those grounds, and the pros and the cons, how the COVID-induced pandemic the pandemic-induced lockdowns first sort of impacted him in a negative sense, and then in a positive sense. We will be getting Arpit Kumar on board here, right? Arpit, over to you.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Good evening and happy Independence Day. Thank you, Ajay, for having me on board today, and thank you, IYEA, for having me. The last 5 months have captured what the essence of my brand essentially is, Bhasar. So the last 5 months have been Bhasar in the truest form, because initially, if you see, when the lockdown was induced, everyone panicked so much. Like, people didn't know what to do. They were so confused. And in that state of confusion, a lot of brands and a lot of big firms started going on a sort of a roll and started cost cutting, and everyone started saving, and everyone was saying that we have a cash crunch, which was true, but they were really panicking, so to say, and there was no, we were not prepared for this. So what happened was, initially we also did not prepare for this, but we sort of had a plan for what we could do with our customers, since we are a digital focused advertising company. Now, as time passed, we realized that consumer behavior has changed drastically, and everyone has sort of developed new habits of staying online and watching films and watching movies. So new platforms started emerging. So now, essentially, in our business, we are trying to sell other people's services or products, right? So now people don't really buy into just products or just services. They buy into stories. We were looking at billboards, we were looking at TV commercials earlier, before pre-COVID times, as being the traditional form of advertising for all these bigger players in the market. For example, real estate. We would go out and see all these hoardings about big projects coming up. We would see on local television channels advertisements about these new commercial projects coming up. We'll go into the local trains in Mumbai and see posters of these projects coming up. As time passed, people started realizing that this is not the way to go, and they started cutting costs immediately. They did not invest in marketing at all. Now, some of our clients, they were really sort of into experimenting, and we could convince them to keep on going with marketing digitally. Now, as Aksh had mentioned in the beginning, that when a crisis comes, there are two ways that you can take. Either you can reduce threats, or you can go into taking more opportunities. So because I'm very young, we are a really young business. We are just 1 year old. So now we don't really have that bandwidth to create those relationships to reduce threats. As Akshat mentioned, that you could invest in those relationships and asking our clients to say ki haan bhai, aaj we can work for a little longer, you can pay us later. We did not have that bandwidth. So what we had with us was the idea to take opportunities. And Mr. Sani had mentioned that how he invested in those exhibitions and how he used to sort of invest in these physical forms of advertising where he used to get business for the entire year. And a lot of companies face this issue. So we thought that this is the right time to take opportunity out of this. And we started pitching our clients about the stories and the narratives that they can push for creating a brand online, because we thought that this is going to come up in the next 3-4 months if the lockdown continues, which happened. And as I think Mr. David also mentioned, that this is the going forward, this is the approach in fitness also, that people have to come up with innovative ideas to sort of showcase their work in fitness online and have online classes. So what we did was we started doing campaigns where we stopped talking about the business's main product or the business's main service. We started talking about other things just to keep our presence, which a lot of brands missed out on. So this really worked out for us because our competitors did not do that. So we, for example, with real estate, what we did was, in commercial real estate was really hit badly. No one was buying into offices or retail store spaces, right? So this was hit really badly. What we did was, we did campaigns where we spoke nothing about real estate, but we spoke about other things that will come up, like augmented reality, and how augmented reality sort of will increase the sales afterwards, or will start increasing sort of places or opportunities for these real estate people. So that's what we started doing, and that really worked out for us. The places where we were really challenged were two. First of all, it was pitching to clients. You know, in our industry, we have to really build a sort of impression on our client to pitch our services. So those meetings were not happening. So now this becomes a huge challenge, and we can't really go out and pitch our ideas to our clients. So what to do? So we started, asking our clients who are into traditional businesses to come online and speak to us over a Zoom call, which was really tough. I'm telling you, everyone who's doing business in the manufacturing industry or sort of traditional businesses, welcoming them to the digital world was one of our major challenges initially. So now when they started coming up, they started attending these meetings online, we faced another challenge. This challenge was actually producing content. Now we can't go out and shoot, or we can't just produce videos. Now we can't click pictures right now. We can't go out and ask for a whole setup, because everything was packed. So industry was hit badly there also. Like you wouldn't see anyone doing shoots. You wouldn't see anything innovative happening outside in professional studios. So now, how did we overcome these challenges? We started innovating. We started producing content from our homes. We started clicking pictures with a white background at our place. We started shooting videos on Zoom calls. We started shooting interviews on online. So these are a few like ways in which we managed. Now, coming to how this is changing now and what are the solutions to the problems that everyone else mentioned. For example, in the transport business and the hospitality business and other industries like furniture or automobiles, these are businesses which are still struggling, right? So these are the businesses which are still struggling with orders and business. So what we are trying to do with marketing is that we are trying to showcase new stories, like how we can use transportation as a as he mentioned. I think I'm forgetting the name. Mr. I think Sahani, who mentioned that we are facing a huge trouble with transportation business in aviation industry and travel agents. I'm sorry.
That was Mr. Maan. Yeah.
That was Mr. Maan, exactly. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Mr. Maan had mentioned that we are really facing trouble. So what we can do there is we can speak about various offers or various precautionary tales that we're taking care of, and we can promote those kind of things online, because no one is really looking into TV commercials nowadays. The consumption has completely changed. So that is what we are trying to do right now. Moving on, there's one more thing that I want to talk about. Essentially there are new platforms which I was talking about have come up. One is OTT platforms that I was originally talking about, movies, everyone's watching movies online. Second is social media. Third is gaming. Another huge platform where brands are sort of investing a lot of money. And these are really smart people, because the number of people who have started gaming is incremental. Like I have stats here. I have stats which suggest that originally, before lockdown, people who were actually really into gaming used to spend like 1.5 hours on an average into gaming. And nowadays, on an average, people are spending 4 hours a day on gaming. So the kind of time people are spending online on gaming and social media have shown drastic numbers. And even e-commerce. For example, platforms like Amazon, Flipkart, ShopClues, major brands on these platforms have shown immense growth. Now, everyone is sort of realizing that these are the places where we should invest. And even businesses which do not traditionally opt digital advertising or digital platforms to sort of showcase their products are coming here. Now, we are essentially a support system for those people. We are an army of people who can sort of create narratives for them to showcase their products and services online. So the new challenge for us is to build new types of stories or narratives for these people. For example, we've never seen a digital campaign being run for a very traditional household business online. We've seen those TV commercials which big companies are doing, but we've not seen those things online. Now everyone is coming online. Diamond industry, these long generations of people who worked in jewelry and diamond businesses, they started coming online and advertising their businesses online. They started showing their stories online. So all in all, I would say that initially it started off as a bumper speed breaker sort of a thing, where we were having problems with how to deal with these clients who are focused on cost cutting and sort of are panicking. And then slowly, because all of our clients being very sort of ambitious and experimental, we were able to convince them to come on board and continue their digital campaigns with us, which resulted into a happy ending. In the end, in June and July, we were stable enough. We could see that these people are happy with what we have done. And when lockdown opened up, the results were very clear. I'll give you another example of what we did with an educational institute. Okay, now this institute was completely physical institute. Students used to come there and learn a skill. This is a cosmetic industry related skill. So they used to come there and learn the skill. That blew out. No one was traveling anywhere. No one was traveling. So for 5 months, you were losing out on everything that you've built. What they did was, what we suggested to them was, we suggested a sort of a Zoom sort of a setup where people learn online. Now we built that product from scratch. We started writing scripts for those sessions. We started giving out advertisements and clippings on social media and gaming platforms and OTT platforms. That worked out so well. And what happened after that was other brands started getting into that space. Other brands started copying that. So, I mean, you have to be innovative and you have to come up with new formulas and new strategies to showcase your product or service online. You have to come up with new narratives to showcase your service online. And that's what we did. And that's about it in conclusion. Yeah. Ajay?
Yes, Alfred, I think that's absolutely brilliant. And I think we received a lot of great feedback from the audience for your views here. And I think absolutely, and this is the sort of key reason why we got sort of Arpit on board for this. So on some level, if you recall Yogi Berra's words, in theory, there is no difference between theory and practice. In practice, there is. And that's essentially the very key foundations of what business is about. It's It's about struggle. It's about sort of getting there, getting your hands dirty, innovating as and when the situation so demands, right? And based on that, drawing from that, I will be taking my first question for the evening, and I will open that up to all our panelists, whosoever wants to answer it. This question is by Ankit, right? It's on our screen for our viewers and our panelists, whosoever wants to come in on this. He says, please may I ask, how is the adoption of online methods in talent acquisition at small and medium-sized firms going to be henceforth? Are firms or are such firms prepared for that? Thank you. So again, Amit is asking about how small, medium, micro enterprises will be looking at sort of hiring new talent, right? Utilizing online methods, right? Parts and bits of building from what Arpit suggested. And is there anyone who wants to specifically come in on this and give their points of view?
I can talk.
Yes, Arpit.
Initially, when the lockdown was enforced and we were facing troubles with business, so to say, our clients were, as I mentioned, they were panicking. It was a huge problem for us also because there were budget cuts in marketing, and we couldn't really sort of hold up if this went on for too long. But as Mr. Sani had mentioned, your people are the most important asset, right? So we held on to those people and we paid our salaries in full. And what happened eventually was that we had demand for more sort of team members. We were overworked and we wanted to hire new people. So I'm sharing an experience of how we tackled the hiring process online. Earlier, we used to have like 3 rounds of interviews, which were physical interviews, and we used to speak to these people, and we used to give them tasks and all. But when this situation came up, it was not that tough actually. We just interviewed people on Zoom, and for a small or medium-sized business, when they're not hiring, say 100 people or 200 people, we're hiring 5, 6, 7, 10 people. I don't think that's a big issue to hire people online via Zoom calls or just getting to know them or interviewing them with multiple rounds online. It can be completely done online or over emails. I don't think this was a huge challenge, so to say. But going ahead, we can come up with more innovative ideas, like giving them tasks online or to do like right on board. There are a lot of apps which have come up where you can just like time your task and sort of understand what the candidate is capable of. So it really isn't that big of a change, so to say, because everything that was being done physically has just come online and we're speaking over Zoom. Obviously, there is slight disconnect because in India, a lot of people have internet issues and connectivity issues. So that's going to be a problem everywhere. But otherwise, the methods that we are going to be using for hiring people and the process that's going to happen is not going to be changing. And it did not.
Yes, I think, Arpit, that's going to be very easy for you to say, considering a good chunk of your work is already online. Exactly. But I do understand that firms that have sort of low-skilled labor, or at times where the kind of work that is done, right, either on the floor, where either there's some testing involved or there's some sort of initial training involved at times. And I believe Mr. Sani would have good experience in this. That on some level, that process cannot be replicated online, especially for these industries. So I think certainly a business that's gone completely online would have much ease in doing that. But I think it's a very pertinent point that small, medium, and micro enterprises must utilize the technology and the technological platforms available so that they can not just hire, but even sort of look at sort of surviving this pandemic. Right? Again, thriving and sort of brick and mortar stores sort of going online to meet online competition is another important aspect here. And most certainly, I think we're way past our 1.5 hour timeline. Amit thanks Arpit for his great insight. Once again, I would like to thank all of our panelists for joining us here today. This has indeed been an extremely insightful session. It is my personal wish that on some level we have another such session. We would like feedback from our audience on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn, everywhere this is being streamed. That we have in the pipeline, obviously, many sessions on law, history, and sort of the economy and education coming this week to you, to the 22nd of August. But at the same time, we want to have other sessions at later dates dealing with the problems that businessmen and businesswomen are facing across this country. So we want representation from other industries, and we have panels ready for that. We look forward to feedback from your side, what all you would like us to do in the near future. Most certainly, we will be planning some podcasts in Hindi. We received some positive feedback in the comments for a Punjabi podcast. I think we should be ready for that, and we should get a sense of the economic gist and the legal gist out of the songs of the greats Gurdas Maan and Sidhu Moosewala. Right, on that sort of a lighter note, I bid you all farewell, and once again, very happy Independence Day to you. We must remember, as always, that that has to be valued for all the hundreds and thousands and lakhs of people who laid down their lives without knowing what they were laying down their lives for, without not having any idea about how freedom would be, what it would be like, what freedom would taste like. Without knowing what the structure of the new free country would be, they still laid down their lives. There's still soldiers at the border defending us. And as much as people would want to say that freedom flows from the fact, as long as it's in our hearts and it's in our textbooks, it's in our laws, certainly it is. That goes without saying. But the most important part, the tangible reality, and I speak this as a realist, right? The tangible reality of freedom is that ideas, just as freedom is, survive only as long as the people supporting those ideas. On some level, we have a democracy, we have a sovereign state, and most importantly, we have a free state only because there is someone out there willing to risk his life to protect that nation. We might have differences on domestic fronts, we might have differences on economic policy, we might even have differences on how businesses are to be supported. But one thing we cannot have any difference on is that the nation must survive. To quote perhaps one of the greatest prime ministers this country has ever had, मतभेद होंगे, पार्टियां आएंगी जाएंगी, ये देश रहना चाहिए, इस देश का स्वतंत्र का लोकतंत्र रहना चाहिए. Thank you so much everyone for joining us. Once again, a very happy